Chief Nwodo, welcome to Newsnight.
Thank you.
Former Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu was attacked by those later identified as members of the indigenous peoples of Biafra, IPOB, in Germany. The report is that actually you were supposed to have been at that event, but for some kind of scheduling conflict. And there was a lot of issue generated from that. Senator Ekweremadu himself said, look, they were misguided, and that was how he was going to leave it. But it does appear that authorities, law enforcement, are not going to leave it like that, especially in light of investigations that were then conducted. But first, I want you to react to the attack itself. As a leader of Ndiigbo, the people attacking, the person being attacked are both of Igbo stock. Is that a kind of spill out, if you like, of internal dynamics of what's going on currently within the group?
I don't think so. In regard to the last part of your question, the act in itself is condemnable. It is un-Igbo. It is uncivilized. And the earlier those tendencies are stopped, the better for all of us. In the Igbo culture, it is sacrilegious. It is unheard of for a young man to attack someone old enough to be his father. Secondly, for somebody in a leadership position like Senator Ekweremadu, there is some honor and respectability that goes with it. To attack him in a foreign country, attempt to tear his clothes, that in itself is assault, is affray. In any interpretation of criminal law, it's wrong. It's justiciable. I mean, you can take somebody to court for it. And can you imagine a father taking a son to court for a criminal offense of assault? This is only an indication that there is no dialogue between father and son anymore. Now, I probably am a biased person to ask this question because I was intended to be there with Ekweremadu, but my visas came 2 days after the attack. And I persuaded Ekweremadu to go because all the disparate Igbo organizations in Germany were coming together in an Igbo day. And they used the opportunity to dramatize some of Igbo culture, including, but the essence of the thing was to reconcile them, to become one. And I said to Ekweremadu, if I can't go, you too can help me to reconcile these boys. Everybody wanted to be president of an Igbo organization. In the end, there were about 8 Igbo organizations, none of which were ready to bow for one another. And Ekweremadu was going there, not only as a guest speaker, but as a father to unite them. And he never expected this. And so he didn't take any retinue of personal security. He was going to meet his brethren, and this happened to him. Supposing he had some personal security, there would have been a fracas of inestimable proportion. But what does this portray of us to the outside world? First, we are people who do not respect our culture. Now, for IPOB, as an organization of young men who are saying, we cannot exist in a federation where we are jaundiced in terms of the kind of discrimination or marginalization that our people are meted out with. And we want a country of our own, reenacting what we at their age did when we fought for Biafra. And they've been proscribed and described as a terrorist organization. And we've said that this is a wrong decision. And we've defended them in every international fora. For you to turn an international fora into a display of terrorism, it completely nullifies all our defense and makes us look as if we don't really know our children. But those who did it in Germany are a minority of IPOB members. It cannot be said that all of IPOB is terrorist because they did this in Nuremberg. But the encouragement of them by the rest of the IPOB leadership gives a vicarious liability for such a senseless act. That is most regrettable.
Because subsequent to that, it was then said that it was not just going to be a one-off. They were going to proceed to attack all those they identified as Igbo leaders who did not support their battle for self-determination and so on. And yet there were those who pointed out that the fact that the leader of IPOB himself, I'm talking about Nnamdi Kanu, was enjoying freedom was due to some of the people that the group was now threatening with assault, even outside the country. I raise that and I talk about that because it ties in, you know, when you take a look at maybe the question of Ndiigbo itself as a group and what it does or what it could do within the Nigerian Federation.
On the contrary, to deal with the last aspect of your question, I don't think it characterizes Ndiigbo in any way. Look, in northern Nigeria today, the youth are amok. In the president's own home state, it's impossible to survive in the interior parts. His own traditional ruler has been kidnapped by people of northern origin and kept in captivity for such a long time. Now, in other parts of northern Nigeria, as they celebrate Salah, leaders find it impossible to go to their homes. And these young men are armed, and they loot and plunder. The governor of Katsina State was even seen on pictures with an armed bandit carrying an AK-47 rifle that was uncocked. The ammunitions were still there while he was talking with him and trying to reconcile with him. They've gone one step higher than us. They've become militant. They've become uncontrollable. Outcrops of this, if I might use a geological expression, are the Boko Haram, which is now two sects of Boko Haram. One is sponsored by ISIS, and they are rampaging our armed forces. Now, for the fact that there is a schism between some Igbo leaders and some of our youths, and if I called out all the youths in Igbo land, those who will come out will submerge those who believe in this violent way of settling disputes. So it doesn't characterize us. It just dramatizes the impatience of those of them who live abroad and who cannot take our situation. And don't forget, there is a historical aberration in our country. The fact that we disqualified our schools from training people in history has meant that the present generation of young people do not know where we are coming from. There is no one who has seen the war who will opt for a violent solution to our current problems. The solution is diplomatic. We have to engage in dialogue. We have to engage the institutions of governance within and without the country to bring our case to the fore. And interestingly, our case is not peculiar to only Igbos. Many other parts of Nigeria feel that the ground is not level. And this is what gave rise to the Southern and Middle Belt Leadership Forum. So the Yorubas of Afenifere, the Pandef in the South, you know, the Middle Belt, and Ohanaeze are now saying the same thing. Restructure this federation. Take us back to the agreement our forefathers reached with the colonial masters when independence was declared. Our present extant constitution is an imposition of the military. A supreme military council that was not elected by anybody, that did not respect any known parameter in its recruitment except seniority in the army, that was lopsided in terms of its geographical identity of membership, imposed a constitution, enacted it like a legislation. It was not subjected to a plebiscite. It was not subjected to a referendum. In law, you say it's not autochthonous because the people did not agree that the 1999 constitution is their constitution. We didn't vote for its approval. So it's not cognizable in law as a valid constitution. It has been imposed of us by sheer force. And no government has had the courage to subject it to a national plebiscite. And if you do, most Nigerians will say, this is not our constitution. We've created local government and states administrative structures that do not obey any known parameter. We've taken away the sovereignty of natural resources from our people and concentrated in an omnibus and amorphous federal government that is characterized by inefficiency over time.
But is this why your ethnic group has taken the matter to the United Nations?
Well, a number of people who feel aggrieved in my ethnic group have made representations to the United Nations. Ohanaeze as a body has made representations to the United Nations because what is happening in our country is inconsistent with international human rights to which we signed up to in our membership of international organizations like the United Nations, which has civil rights and liberties, like the African Union, and like our regional ECOWAS Union. And they all have courts that enforce these rights if they are violated by any member nations. And that's why you have the International Criminal Court and what have you. And I have written a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations. And following my letter, he sent his Under-Secretary, Ibn Chambers, for our sub-region and the Sahel to come and visit me with 5 of the directors of the United Nations. And I had on my side, apart from some of our leaders, 4 Igbo ambassadors, some of whom had worked in the United Nations. And we had about 5 hours meeting. And Mr. Chambers acknowledged that he had never had such an expose as we had made to him. I have written a follow-up letter recently. I have also written to the EU. I have written to the ECOWAS. And I've written to all embassies in Nigeria as a conduit to their various governments. Because what is happening here can be, we can avert an insurrection. We can avert a breakdown of law and order by looking for a diplomatic solution.
Now, let me put that on pause. We'll come back to it a bit later on in discussion when we come to politics. But for now, it seems as it would appear as if, like many other regions in the country to which you've alluded, insecurity seems to be the major preoccupation of everybody now. In the Southeast, the Governors Forum, the Southeast Governors Forum, has taken a number of measures, forest rangers, trying to put up infrastructure, clear the roads, reintroduce a number of measures which may be akin to community policing. And
so have the Southwest governors. And
the Southwest governors have also taken a cue from that. And so I asked the question, what's your take on the situation now?
First of all, security will break down if the standard of living goes down, if the economy is broken. A hungry man is an angry man. A man who is idle is a devil's workshop. At no time in the history of our country has our economy broken down as badly as it has done now. What is the picture? Right now, we are spending 70% of our national revenue to service our debts without retiring the principal. Right now, oil, which is the major source of our national revenue, apart from the bombing of Saudi Arabia the other day, is having a declining revenue. As soon as the Saudi Arabia refinery is repaired, we will go back to the picture. This is because the United States of America has discovered shale oil technology, which is basically hydrogenation, melting of hydrocarbons and all kinds of solid structures of that characterization into crude oil. But by the end of this year, United States will be producing 12 million barrels of shale oil. And they'll be domesticating 5 million barrels for domestic consumption. And 7 million will be dumped into the international market. The implication of this in demand and supply is that when the supply is higher than the demand, the price will fall. So we have an inevitable fall of the price of crude oil, the mainstay of our economy, without a corresponding rise of revenue on non-oil products. In the last 6 years, our revenue on non-oil products has remained the same. There's been no increase. So it's not likely to reflect in the servicing of our debt. Now, our unemployment has continued to soar. Our quality of education has remained low. Now, look at the non-oil products. A country like Netherlands is the 14th largest economy in the world. Its geographical area is probably half of Niger State, about 34 to 37 square kilometers, one of 37 administrative units in Nigeria. But its production of dairy and vegetable earns it $100 billion a year. When you go there, you have grain farms built like skyscrapers because of scarcity of land. And their production is incredible. And the country is living on just that. Our crude oil has never given us $100 billion in a year. It hasn't given us 70. And a small country like Netherlands is able to do that. Now, the question is, when we talk about restructuring and allowing people to own their natural resources, some people in the North think that this is a Southern agenda against the North enjoying the crude oil. But the truth of the matter is that the agricultural resources of this country is weighted in favor of the North. And if we took time to develop the animal husbandry there, the dairy that will come, not just the meat, the vegetables of different dimensions, the fruits of different dimensions grown in different climates in northern Nigeria, the grains that are in abundance, the tubers, northern Nigeria will be the mainstay of Nigerian economy. But we have skewed ourselves by a useless constitution that takes away the capacity of local governments to develop their homegrown economy. And therefore to build a work ethic which makes the young man feel that I have a responsibility, I have a duty to increase the rate of standard of living by expanding production. It is worse with our educational system. The people who manage our educational system, what has the federal government got to do with getting involved in primary education? Because of the constitutional structure. Consequently, our children are nowhere near the trending curse of education, which is powering development in other countries. All the companies in the world that are highest in the stock exchange and in human capital development are companies powered by IT and technological development. You have people reading computer science without any knowledge of computer appreciation. All over the world and in some parts of Africa, people have computer awareness at primary school level. Children are already playing with computers. And in any case, the internet is the repository of global knowledge. You can teach yourself anything on the internet. How many Nigerian children have access to internet? How many villages have Wi-Fi connection? So your question was this security. Yeah. And I am saying that the poverty we have descended into, the fact that government reminds us all too often of our ethnic identities, and ethnic identity tends to be the major criterion in choosing people to be in sensitive positions in our country, whether they be in areas of wealth creation, education, or security of the nation.
From what you said now, earlier in the interview, you alluded to the fact that we needed to develop all the resources. One of the things that's become a problem is what to do with herdsmen who traditionally have traversed the country and have done so without conflict up until recently. In trying to address this problem, which prominently in the Middle Belt has actually become more than just a security challenge, it's become a fair catastrophe, and that has spread to other parts of the country in more recent times. But it seems as if it has also taken a north-south divide. In the north, the authorities are talking about Ruga, they're talking about the National Livestock Transformation Plan, and so on. In the south, almost without exception, the position is, we don't have land to give you for this project. Anybody who wants to do this should come and negotiate, buy land like every other businessman and do this. The question, therefore, is, are we not being short-sighted in addressing this way? Especially because it seems as if there's a general recognition that this is an actual problem.
To be honest with you, I put the blame squarely on the President of Nigeria and the people of Nigeria.
Why?
The President of Nigeria has allowed a crisis to smolder on something he has every authority to address because of his biases. Secondly, the people of Nigeria have embraced democracy without embracing the culture of democracy. We don't speak to government. We don't hold government accountable. And so anybody who is in government is like a superior Nigerian. If he's a local government chairman, he can do whatever he likes. He doesn't need to account to you how he spends his local government money. If he's a governor, he can do what he likes. If he's a president, it is a higher form of what you like. When I was a child, herdsmen were in my part of the country. They never carried weapons. They carried sticks. They never invaded people's farms. They went to grazing fields. In fact, the Eastern Nigerian government established a cattle ranch in Nwodo where we grew our local Muturu cows. Now, there was no conflict of this nature. As I grew up in Enugu, I saw a lot of Hausas and Fulanis who lived in Enugu. In Enugu municipality, the election for the mayor of Enugu was between a Fulani man from Katsina, Umaru Altini, and an Igbo man. And Zik was campaigning for the Fulani man, and he won election into Enugu, just like I did in Ibadan. Now, but what we now have is a jihad. People come from Futa Jalon, from Guinea, and all kinds of places, and they invade our country. Our borders are porous. If you have ever been to any of the borderline states in Katsina, in Sokoto, you find that you don't need a passport to enter Nigeria. So, my brother, what we have, how can a law say that the state government is a custodian of land? And the state assembly, in our constitution, in Benue State, makes a law saying you can't establish these kind of things you want except it's regulated in a ranch. You don't. How can governor of a Benue State say you can't move cattle in my state except by vehicular movement? You don't do it by land because you ravage our farms. And a Miati Allah chiefdom tells him you can't do that. And nobody arrests him. He's free to, but IPOB says this is not a fair country and you arrest all of them and declare them a terrorist organization. Something is wrong, fundamentally wrong. This is political. And if it's not handled well, it has the incendiary capacity to destroy the foundations of our democracy and our federation. And God forbid that it should happen.
Those who would be listening to you and probably have listened to people like you in the recent past would say, given the background you've just given and given the position you've taken, was it therefore a political miscalculation
To?
in 2015 and 2019 for the Southeast not to go in the direction of those who eventually won.
There's something that is fundamentally wrong in our politics. You see, in politics, freedom of choice of who you support in an election is a function of how much his manifesto represents your popular views. And it has nothing to do with your reception of the benefits of governance. The Constitution requires every public functionary to exercise his authority without fear of favor, discrimination, ill will, or affection. If it is found that the president, as he openly said in London, is acting out his words and giving government amenities according to how he was voted for, it is an impeachable offense. It is a dereliction of our Constitution and of his oath of office. When I was in MPN with Shehu Shagari, he lost in the East in his first election as president. But we went to a meeting of the party, and one Idris, who was deputy speaker from Niger, got up and said that the Igbos have got more positions in government that they do not deserve because they didn't vote for us. And that out of 10 advisors of the president, 6 were Igbos, and which was true. You know, Emmanuel Edozian was economic advisor, Mbadiwe was National Assembly liaison advisor, Okadibo was political advisor, Denigwe was political advisor, I was special assistant to the president on special duties, and there was someone else. And I got up, Okadibo got up. We insisted that he should withdraw it because it was a fundamental derogation to our Constitution. And he did. Akinloye, as chairman, insisted that he must withdraw it, and he did. Now, the question is, at the end of an election, whoever won has no opposition anymore. And you know that by his policies, Shehu Shagari turned around and won the Southeast. By the way he embraced them, even after they had voted against him. This is politics. You must have my interest in your manifesto. If you don't have it, I have no business. In the last election, which I can speak for, the preponderance of opinion in Igbo land is that we must have restructuring. And we can only support anyone who is prepared to return Nigeria to what it was at independence. It was a non-negotiable platform. And as President General of Ohanaeze, I risked my personal security for not dancing along the tune of the Igbos. That was their popular will. And it was my responsibility to voice it out. And these views were siphoned after several consultative meetings with our people. And their voting did not disguise this. I didn't force each one to do so. They want their destiny in their own hands. And you dare say, in the Middle Belt, that occurred. The West was divided dramatically into two on this. And I believe that the division was part because of the fact that a Westerner was vice president of Nigeria and on the ticket. Otherwise, the broad spectrum of the Yorubas wanted restructuring. So the South-South was clearly for restructuring in their voting pattern. So I have no regrets that Igbos went the way they did. It was a function of their political desire to have Nigeria restructured and to feel like equal citizens in their own country.
Before I come to this definition of the restructuring that you talk about and that you've mentioned again and again, I must then ask the follow-up to what you've just explained, which is now that, okay, 2019 has come and gone. People have looked forward to 2023. And some of those who have analyzed the situation say that, okay, well, with the way the history of the country has gone now, at the end of the current president's mandate for another 4 years, which would be 2023, the political calculation is such that by the informal gentleman's agreement reached within the major parties, power is supposed to go down south. And because the last time it was down south, it went in the direction of the southwest. And you've had the South-South as president with Dr. Goodluck Jonathan. That leaves just one geopolitical zone whose turn, and pardon me if I use that phrase, it is. But those who make that argument say that some of the things we've talked about in the earlier part of the discussion will make that difficult, if not impossible. Because even if the rest of the country were to say, okay, Southeast, it's your turn, give us a candidate, that will be the beginning of another problem, even within the Southeast.
No,
what do you think?
That's not true. I mean, first of all, the presidency has been made too important by the amount of powers the Constitution has invested on the president and the federal government. And that's why the presidency is an instrument for sectional aggrandizement. And that's why there's so much battle for everyone to get it. It's like sharing a national cake rather than baking a national cake. The presidency should bake the national cake, but it is an instrument for sharing the national cake. So the concept of those who talk about power sharing, I don't share.
You don't think?
I don't share it because what is important for me is that we should have the structure of Nigeria revisited.
It has been the lifelong dream of many generations of Southeasterners.
I'm coming to that. You must understand the fundamental error in this pepped-up feeling that every part of the country must get a share of the national cake, because the presidency is an instrument for sharing of national cake rather than baking the national cake.
Okay.
Now, when we were in post-independence government, the premiers were more powerful than the prime minister, which is why the leader of the MPC refused to come to Lagos and become prime minister, because the power for wealth creation rested in the regions. So this craze for presidency and its zoning is a negation for building of a virile economy and a united country. Having said so, you see, for me, the question of a president coming from the Southeast, giving the Southeasterners a sense of belonging that they are part of Nigeria, fine. But the issue is not a matter of zoning of the presidency. The issue is finding a right material for president. All too often, there's no scrutiny of these candidates. And the parties have developed some kind of sovereignty that is greater than the voters by limiting the option of candidates to who the godfathers in the parties want. In the end, the country does not have the opportunity to choose the best person who can breathe life into the national economy.
Just to clarify,
and you raise the point.
Person, no, when you say the best person, are you talking about the best person nationally or the best person in the Southeast?
Nationally.
Okay.
Don't forget that even if you zone the presidency to the Southeast, the nomination will be done by the respective parties to choose who amongst their members of the Southeast they would want to be president. The recruitment exercise is not objective. Its subjectivity overweighs its subjectivity, so that we don't really get the best candidates for that position. Secondly, I think it would be wrong to say that when it is the turn of the Southeast, that the Southeast will be embroiled with so much internal division that they'll be unable to agree. Because as I have said to you, it is not the Southeast that will bring somebody. It is the parties that will choose, and the parties are made of people from all over. It is going to be a president of Nigeria chosen by Nigerians. So they'll be chosen by members of the party from a particular area. So it's not only Igbos who are going to bring out the president. So that does not arise. And however, even if Igbos have to have a choice in recommending who they want, I think Igbos believe you me, have a capacity to agree on sensitive issues. The idea, the notion that I know other places where there are disputes regarding their leadership. I know other places that it's difficult to identify their socio-cultural organization that is central and accepted by all of them.
People point to the Peter Obi example when they talk that way. Because you alluded to it a bit earlier when you talked about the dynamics in 2019. And you said, okay, well, the Southwesterner, and that's in the person of Professor Shibaju, was on the ticket of one of the parties. Yeah. And then when the other party produced a presidential candidate, he then said, I want someone from the Southeast. Mm-hmm. And when he selected Mr. Peter Obi, former governor of Anambra State, the feeling in the Southeast was that, first, they were not consulted, which they felt they ought to have been. Mm-hmm. And then, as a result of the non-consultation, they felt that they could have produced a number of options from which, quote and unquote, the best could have emerged, as opposed to Alhaji Atiku Abubakar simply just handpicking Mr. Peter Obi.
Well, first of all, it's not for me to make explanations for what happens in an internal political party. But as a father, what is important to me is President Buhari has, in his previous bids for the presidency, chosen Igbo candidates. Notwithstanding those decisions, the Igbos did not vote for him.
For the same reason?
Notwithstanding those choices, the Igbos did not vote for him. Now, a few members and leading members of the PDP had felt that they would have been asked to recommend someone, and that if they didn't get that recommendation, it smacked of disrespect. But the overwhelming consideration in the minds of most Igbos was, at the end of the day, who did Atiku Abubakar choose? Peter Obi's personal qualifications assailed those misgivings. I mean, Peter Obi as a governor is arguably, in this generation of politics, since this advent of this constitution, the best governor Nigeria has ever produced. Because if you go to Anambra State and see how Peter Obi improved infrastructure in his state, if you see how Peter Obi attracted international finance organizations, if you see how Peter Obi increased human capital development, from Anambra being the 14th state in performance in school certificate to the first in Nigeria, if you see how he built savings as a basis to build economic credibility of government, to get financial empowerment from financing institutions, to embark on bigger projects. If you see how the growth of agro-based industries, assembly plants for cars, have grown in Anambra, God have mercy. Peter Obi was something to celebrate in Igbo land. So don't diminish his achievements. He has a soft mien that does not shout to his abilities, but he has done well in the political arena.
So the bigger question then, what is the position of the Southeast going into these calculations? I've given you a scenario. You have looked at that scenario and you said, well, there are a few flaws in it. But ultimately, you would believe that natural justice would tend to present the Southwest with an opportunity now in 2023.
To be honest with you, my training and upbringing does not allow me to dance to this tune of zoning in terms of choosing people and that kind of thing. What I want for the Southeast, if you ask my personal opinion, and what I think most people in the Southeast want, is that we should be allowed to develop our place at our own pace. Let's go to a restructured Nigeria in which every area, the question of who becomes president of Nigeria will become less controversial. I hate this idea of donating the presidency to a particular section just to assuage their feelings. And rather than bake the cake, we share the cake. Naturally, every Southeasterner would like the president of Nigeria to come from the Southeast. But the recruitment process in Nigeria has to be rejigged. The parties have become anointing stations with no democratic credentials for making the best of decisions. So a bright man who wants to be, look at the former deputy governor of Central Bank who came to run for president. He was easily the most educated of the presidential candidates. His experience in macroeconomic management was unassailable. But it was impossible, given the influence of political parties, leading political parties in our country, for him to make any major showing. People were voting for their parties rather than for the individuals. So we have to go through a rejig of our entire political process. Even though it will be in the benefit of the Southeast to have the next president come from it, and it will assuage their feelings of marginalization. You know, a Southeastern president of Nigeria with a jaundiced constitution still remains ineffective and unsatisfactory to the people of the Southeast.
Now, as we wind this down, I must then now ask you, in clear terms, what exactly is this restructuring?
It's very simple. It's devolution of powers. There is no reason on earth why you should have primary education administered from the federal government. There is no reason why you should have the mineral resources in every part of Nigeria, whether it is gold in Zamfara, or diamond or bauxite, or tin in Plateau, administered by the federal government without recourse to the state governments that are there. The states should have complete control of all natural resources. No, we had a revenue formula by which a percentage of it was given to the federal government. But the sovereignty remained in the rights. And we recognized it under the military regime in the land use law, in which state governments were made owners of the land in the states. How can you be owner of a land, but you are not owner of the mineral resources in the land? That makes sense to me. So the whole essence of restructuring is go back to your places and have sovereignty over your mineral resources, have sovereignty over your domestic security. All federal laws will be enforced by federal police, and all local laws will be enforced by state or regional police. It's as simple as that. Now, this will unleash tremendous energy in areas that have been neglected in our country, namely agriculture, education, health, and social services, which are the basis for development. I mean, do you realize the rate of growth of Nigeria under a restructured Nigeria after independence was faster than the rate of growth now? And that's really the reason. The tendency all over the world is micromanagement. I'm sure that even in channels television, you have more efficiency when you have micromanagement. When the management is too far from the people right at the stage, it makes it impossible for there to be efficiency. So we need to go back. In the time that I was a child growing up, we begged people to come back from their important positions in establishments to be councillors and chairmen of council. And they were usually retired people in the public service who had no ambition to build their first houses or buy a car, but just to leave significant footprints in the sands of time. That has all been rubbished.
Finally, and this is personal to you, when you take a look at it, you go back in your mind, the various struggles, the battles, the arguments. You alluded to it a little bit earlier when you talked about putting yourself out there, personal risk. The house in Enugu you described, they attempted to bomb it with you in it. When all is said and done, Do you think at the end of, do you think it comes out as being worth it to you personally? When you sit down, you put the pros and cons together.
You know, I went to school in England, and I used to live in a place not far away from Victoria and Knightsbridge, where the Buckingham Palace is. And as I walked to school or rode to school every morning, I came across the Brigade of Guards in England. And the Brigade of Guards had a motto which says, "He who dares wins." In your position in channels, you hold a leadership position in the kind of thing that you do, and you face extreme challenges and personal discomfort in it. The joy is how you overcome it and blaze a trail and set a standard for those coming behind you. In my local language, they say you cannot, because people die in a war front, avoid to go to a war when it's inevitable. The kind of unanimous approval that I had from Igbos to be President General of Ohanaeze leaves me with no choice but to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm not paid a salary. You've seen the humility of my home after being minister twice. I have lost 3 cars in this job. My house has been bombed. My children detest the propaganda, especially the false ones that are disseminated about me in the social media. But I'm reinforced by the fact that first, lies do not have a tenure. They are very quickly eclipsed by the intimidating forces of truth. True. All great people in history are people who were prepared to take a risk on behalf of others. And if this is my lot, laddie, I'm too happy to forge ahead.
Chief Nwodo, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.